Jealous mistress pushed billionaire pregnant wife into pool on delivery day. Watch what he did next. The cream-colored envelope sat on Nora Bellamy's marble kitchen counter like a venomous snake, coiled and waiting to strike. Morning sunlight streamed through the spotless windows, making the expensive cardstock seem to glow with malevolent purpose. Nora's hand instinctively moved to her swollen belly, feeling her unborn daughter shift restlessly within. 8 months pregnant, and the baby seemed to sense the storm brewing in her mother's chest. For nearly 15 minutes, Nora had been standing motionless, unable to bring herself to break the seal, though she already suspected what waited inside. The return address alone told a story: Caldwell Estate Management. Harrison Caldwell was her husband Julian's mentor, a real estate mogul whose Mediterranean villa regularly graced the society pages of business journals. 3 nights ago, Julian had mentioned something about a celebration. His tone had been deliberately casual, dismissive even, as he spoke without lifting his eyes from his laptop screen. Just a gathering, he'd said. Business associates, potential investors. Nothing you need to worry yourself about. But Nora did worry. These days, anxiety hummed beneath her skin like a constant electrical current. She worried about the baby, about their future, about how her marriage had transformed into something cold and hollow that echoed mockingly whenever she tried to speak into it. Finally, her trembling fingers slid under the envelope's flap, extracting the heavy cardstock within. The calligraphy was exquisite, the kind that announced importance before the words even registered. You are cordially invited to celebrate the union of Julian Cross and Margot Sinclair. August 21st. 7 o'clock evening. Black tie optional. Oceanfront reception to follow. The invitation fluttered from Nora's nerveless fingers, landing face up on the counter. Those words stared back at her, each one a dagger. Union. They were calling it a union. Her husband. And his mistress. The kitchen tilted dangerously. Nora gripped the counter's edge, her pregnant belly pressing against the cold marble as her daughter kicked in what felt like protest against this insanity. Margot Sinclair. The name tasted bitter on Nora's tongue. A woman with porcelain skin and razor-sharp ambition who had infiltrated their lives 18 months ago as a marketing consultant. Julian had hired her to rebrand his real estate company, but she had ultimately rebranded his entire existence. Slowly, methodically, Margot had positioned herself not merely in Julian's business but in his bed, in his future plans, in the space that had once belonged to Nora. And now they were celebrating. Publicly. While Nora still wore Julian's wedding ring. While she carried his child. While their marriage certificate still hung in its frame in his downtown office, gathering dust behind his numerous awards and accolades. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made Nora straighten instinctively, a learned response from years of trying to appear composed for her husband's critical eye. Julian appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the office in one of his meticulously tailored suits. His dark hair was styled with that studied casualness that actually required considerable effort. The $18,000 watch on his wrist caught the morning light, a symbol of everything he valued. At 42, he remained handsome in that sharp, calculated way that had initially attracted her during their college years. Back when she had mistaken his ambition for passion, his intensity for devotion, his laser focus for love. His eyes flicked to the invitation on the counter, then to her face. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth, not warmth, but something closer to satisfaction. You got it, he stated. Not a question, but a declaration of fact. Nora found her voice, though it emerged smaller than intended. Julian, what is this? What do you mean, what is it? His tone remained light, casual, as if they were discussing weekend plans rather than the systematic destruction of their marriage. It's an invitation. You'll come, won't you? The question hung between them, absurd and cruel in equal measure. He couldn't be serious. He couldn't actually expect her to attend a party celebrating his relationship with another woman while she was 8 months pregnant with his child. But the look in his eyes told her he was entirely serious. More than that, he expected her compliance. He expected her to smile, nod, and play whatever role he had scripted for her in this humiliating theater. "Come," Nora repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You want me to come to your wedding celebration?" "It's not a wedding," Julian corrected smoothly, pouring himself coffee with steady hands. "Not technically. It's more of an announcement. A commitment ceremony." Margot wanted something memorable, something that would make a statement. He sipped his coffee, watching her over the rim. "And it would look strange if you weren't there. People would talk." "People are already talking," Nora said, her hands trembling against her belly. "They've been talking for months, Julian. Everyone knows about you and Margot. Everyone except apparently me, because I was the last person to figure it out." "That's not true." He set his coffee down with a soft click. "You knew. You just didn't want to admit it. You chose denial, Nora. That's not my fault." The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment Nora almost believed him. Almost accepted his version of reality where her pain was her own fault, where his betrayal was somehow her failure to see what was obvious. But the baby kicked again, hard, grounding her in truth. Reminding her that there was more at stake now than just her own shattered heart. "I'm not going," she said quietly but firmly. "You cannot actually expect me to go." Julian's casual mask slipped just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "You will go, Nora. For appearances. For civility. Because despite everything, we are still married, and you are still carrying my child, and the last thing I need is people thinking there's ugly drama in my personal life. It reflects poorly on business." Nora stared at this man she had loved, this man with whom she had built a life, and saw clearly what she had been refusing to acknowledge for so long. He didn't love her. He probably never had. She had been useful once, back when he was building his company, when her endless support and belief in him had fueled his climb upward. When her student loans had paid their rent while he focused on his first big deal. When her hands had typed his proposals late into the night, her eyes burning from staring at the computer screen. But now he had reached the summit, and she was just dead weight. Something to be managed. An inconvenience to be handled with the same cold efficiency he brought to difficult business negotiations. "And what if I refuse?" she asked. "What if I just stay home?" His smile returned, but now it looked like a threat. "Then everyone will know that you're unstable. That the pregnancy has made you irrational and difficult. That I've been trying to manage your episodes while still maintaining my professional obligations. Is that the story you want people to tell about the mother of my child?" The implicit threat was crystal clear. He would ruin her reputation, paint her as crazy, use her own pain as proof of her instability. And people would believe him, because they always believed men like Julian, successful, charming, powerful men who spoke with confidence and certainty. Nora's hands shook as she picked up the invitation again, the expensive cardstock suddenly feeling like evidence in her own trial. "When is it?" she whispered. "August 21st, he repeated. 3 weeks from now. Plenty of time to find something appropriate to wear. Something that doesn't make you look quite so." He paused, his eyes scanning her disheveled appearance, miserable. He checked his watch, already moving toward the door, already dismissing her from his thoughts. "I have a breakfast meeting. Don't wait up tonight. I'll probably be late. Margot and I have dinner with the Caldwells to finalize details." He paused at the doorway, glancing back with that calculated smile. "Oh, and Nora. Try to look happy when you come. Or at least neutral. I'd hate for people to think you're bitter." Then he was gone. His footsteps receded down the hallway. The front door closed with a solid, final sound. His car engine started and faded into the distance of their gated community. And Nora stood alone in her kitchen, invitation in hand, her daughter kicking inside her, wondering how her life had become so completely unrecognizable. The woman staring back at Nora from the hallway mirror looked like a stranger. Pale skin stretched thin over prominent cheekbones. Dark circles shadowed eyes that used to sparkle with dreams and ambition. Shoulders curved inward as if trying to occupy less space in the world. When had she become so small? When had she stopped fighting? Nora thought back to who she had been before Julian. Nora Hartley, art student, painter, dreamer. She'd had plans once, a studio in the city, gallery showings, a life built around color and light and creation. But Julian had needed her support while he built his empire, so she had set aside her brushes. Just temporarily, she had told herself. Just until he gets established. Just until we're financially stable. That temporary pause had lasted 12 years. Her art supplies now sat in boxes in the garage, buried under Christmas decorations and old tax documents, gathering dust like abandoned dreams. She couldn't even remember the last time she had held a paintbrush, the last time she had felt that surge of creative joy that used to define her. Julian had slowly, systematically convinced her that her art wasn't important. Not practical. Not valuable. Just a hobby, he would say with that condescending smile. Something to do when you have free time. But there was never free time. There was always something Julian needed. A dinner party to host, a client to impress, a house to maintain to his exacting standards. And Nora had complied. Had folded herself smaller and smaller until she almost disappeared entirely. The baby kicked again, harder this time, insistent. "Are you angry too, little one?" Nora whispered, pressing her hand to the spot where a tiny foot or elbow pushed against her skin. "Are you telling me to fight? But fight how? With what weapons?" She had no money of her own. Julian controlled all the accounts. Every credit card bore his name. The house, the cars, the investments, everything built during their marriage somehow belonged only to him. She had no family left. Her mother had died 2 years ago from cancer, and Nora had been an only child. Her father had never been in the picture, having left before she was even born. She had no close friends anymore either. Julian had systematically isolated her over the years, always with reasonable-sounding explanations. That friend was too negative, always complaining. This one was jealous of their success, trying to drag Nora down. That one was a bad influence, encouraging Nora to waste time on her silly art projects instead of supporting her husband. One by one, her support system had been dismantled until all she had left was Julian. Which meant she had nothing at all. The invitation sat on the counter where she'd left it, those elegant words mocking her. Celebrate the union. As if unions were something to celebrate when they were built on the wreckage of someone else's life. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to figure out what to do. 3 weeks to find some kind of strength she wasn't sure she possessed anymore. Nora picked up the invitation and walked slowly to the living room. Her back ached from the weight of the pregnancy. Her feet were swollen. Everything hurt, physically and emotionally. She placed the invitation on the mantel, right next to their wedding photo. The contrast was striking and painful. In the photo, they were young, bright-eyed, full of hope. Julian's arm around her waist looked protective then, loving. His smile reached his eyes. Nora's dress was simple but beautiful, and her face glowed with happiness. Now that same touch felt like ownership. Like a collar. Like a chain. She traced the edge of the frame, remembering that day. The small chapel her mother had helped her find. Her mother in the front row, crying happy tears, so proud of her daughter. The vows they had spoken, promises that felt sacred. For better or worse. Richer or poorer. In sickness and in health. Till death do us part. Julian had kept some of those vows. They were definitely richer now. His company was worth millions. Their house was featured in luxury home magazines. They vacationed in places most people only dreamed about. But the better, the health, the partnership, the love, those had fallen away like dead leaves from a dying tree. And, till death do us part. Well, maybe some marriages died long before the people in them did. Maybe she had been living in the corpse of her marriage for years now, just too afraid or too tired to admit it. For the next 3 weeks, Nora played the role Julian expected. She was quiet, compliant. She asked no questions about his late nights or his dinner meetings with Margot. She smiled when he told her what dress to buy for the party. Navy blue, he had instructed. Conservative. Nothing that draws too much attention. You're not the star of this show, Nora. Remember that. She had nodded, agreed, purchased the dress he wanted. But in the quiet moments, when Julian was at the office or out with Margot, Nora began to document everything. She found an old digital recording device in Julian's desk drawer, one he used for business meetings, and started recording. She documented every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, every moment of gaslighting where he tried to convince her that her reality wasn't real. "This is Nora," she whispered into the device one afternoon. "Today is August 5th. My husband told me I'm required to attend a party celebrating his relationship with his mistress. He says if I don't attend, he'll tell everyone I'm unstable." She paused, gathering courage. "I am 8 months pregnant with his daughter. And I am afraid. Not just of what he'll do if I don't go, but of what it means if I do." She wrote in a journal she kept hidden in her art supply boxes in the garage, the one place Julian never went because he considered her old dreams too pathetic to acknowledge. She took screenshots of Julian's credit card statements showing expensive jewelry purchases she never received, romantic dinners at restaurants she had never been to, hotel rooms booked when he claimed to be working late at the office. She built a case. Not because she knew what she would do with it. Not because she had a plan. But because it made her feel less powerless, like maybe somewhere deep down, the woman she used to be was still fighting, still refusing to disappear completely. The baby dropped lower in her pelvis as the due date approached. At her last appointment, one Julian had missed like he missed all of them. The doctor had warned her to avoid stress, to rest, to prepare for labor that could come any time now. How do you avoid stress when your life is actively falling apart? Nora had wanted to ask. But she just nodded and promised to take it easy, because that was what good patients did. They smiled and agreed and pretended everything was fine. The night before the party, Julian came home earlier than usual. He found Nora in the nursery she had been preparing, folding tiny clothes, organizing bottles and blankets with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. For a moment, standing in the doorway backlit by the hallway light, he almost looked like the man she had married. Almost. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked, his tone neutral, careful. "As ready as I'll ever be," Nora replied without looking at him. Her hands continued folding a small yellow onesie, creasing it precisely, giving her something to focus on besides the anxiety churning in her stomach. Julian stepped into the room, picked up a small stuffed elephant from the crib. His fingers traced its soft ears. "Margot's excited to meet you," he said casually. "She wants you to know there are no hard feelings. That we can all be civilized about this." Nora's hand stilled on the onesie. "Hard feelings," she repeated slowly. "About you replacing me while I'm pregnant with your child." "Yes, I can't imagine why I would have hard feelings about that." He sighed, that patient, condescending sound he made when he thought she was being unreasonable. "This is exactly the kind of attitude I'm talking about, Nora. This bitterness. It's not attractive. It's not healthy. Margot is going to be part of our lives now, part of our daughter's life. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone." "Our daughter," Nora said quietly, finally meeting his eyes. "You keep saying, our daughter. But you've barely been here for this pregnancy. You missed every doctor's appointment. Every ultrasound. You don't know what I've been through carrying her. What this has cost me. And now you want me to smile while you celebrate the woman you're leaving me for. Because it will look good. Because it's civilized." She stood slowly, her pregnant belly between them like a physical reminder of everything he was abandoning. When exactly did you stop loving me, Julian? Or did you ever love me at all? For just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Guilt maybe. Or regret. But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. I loved who you were, he said finally. But people change, Nora. You changed. You became this sad, needy person. Always wanting reassurance. Always making everything so heavy and complicated. Margot is light. She's fun. She doesn't make me feel guilty for being successful. The cruelty of it took her breath away. He had isolated her, controlled her, stripped away her identity piece by piece until she barely recognized herself. And now he was blaming her for the depression that naturally followed. Blaming her for being sad about losing everything. You made me this way, she whispered. You took everything from me. My art, my friends, my confidence. You spent 12 years convincing me I wasn't good enough, and now you're angry that I believe you. Julian shook his head, placing the elephant back in the crib with careful precision. This is what I mean. This victim mentality. I gave you everything, Nora. This house, this life, financial security. And all you can do is complain about your silly art projects and friends who were dragging you down anyway. He moved toward the door. I'm not doing this tonight. I have an early morning tomorrow. We both do. Julian, she called after him. He paused but didn't turn around. What happens after the party? What happens to us? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, without looking back, he said, we'll figure that out. But first, let's get through tomorrow. Just do what I ask, Nora. Just this once, don't make things difficult. The morning of August 21st arrived with deceptive beauty. Sunlight streamed through the windows, birds sang in the garden, the weather forecast promised a perfect evening. 72 degrees, clear skies, gentle ocean breeze. Perfect conditions for a celebration. Or a disaster. Nora dressed carefully, her hands shaking as she pulled on the navy blue dress. It fit differently than when she'd bought it 2 weeks ago. The baby had dropped even lower, changing her shape, making everything feel more urgent. She applied makeup with practiced precision, covering the dark circles under her eyes, adding color to cheeks that had gone pale. In the mirror she almost looked normal. Almost looked like a woman going to a party instead of a woman walking toward her own humiliation. Julian had already left hours ago, claiming he needed to help Harrison set up. Really, Nora knew, he wanted to spend the day with Margot, preparing for their big moment. At 6 o'clock, the car service Julian had arranged arrived. A black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who didn't make eye contact. He opened the door for her silently, helped her maneuver her pregnant body into the back seat, then drove without speaking. The journey to Harrison Caldwell's estate took 40 minutes through winding coastal roads. The Mediterranean stretched endlessly to the left, azure and beautiful and indifferent to human drama. Expensive homes perched on cliffs, their windows reflecting the descending sun. The car turned through massive iron gates, following a private road that curved through manicured gardens. The estate appeared gradually, like something from a magazine. A sprawling Mediterranean villa with terracotta roofs and white stucco walls. Marble fountains. Stone pathways lined with lanterns already glowing in the twilight. And at the center of it all, an infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond, its surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. The driver opened her door. Nora stepped out carefully, one hand on her belly, the other gripping her bag. Music drifted from the gardens, something classical and elegant. Voices murmured, laughter echoed, champagne glasses clinked. With each step toward the gathering, she felt eyes turning toward her, conversations pausing, whispers beginning. That's the wife. 8 months pregnant. How humiliating. Can you imagine? What is she even doing here? The whispers followed her like ghosts, each one a small cut that bled privately. Nora kept her chin up, kept walking, kept breathing even though her lungs felt tight and her heart hammered against her ribs. She emerged into the main courtyard where the party centered. Easily 200 people gathered, all dressed in expensive clothes, all holding drinks, all turning to stare at the pregnant woman arriving alone. And there, near the edge of the infinity pool that glittered like liquid sapphire under strings of lights, stood Julian. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was perfect, his smile confident. And draped on his arm like expensive jewelry was Margot Sinclair. She was stunning, a red dress that hugged every curve, dark hair cascading in waves, makeup flawless. She looked like success, like ambition, like everything Julian wanted in a woman. Everything Nora no longer was. Margot saw her first. Her eyes locked on Nora across the crowd, and her smile sharpened into something predatory. She leaned close to Julian, whispered something in his ear. He turned, his expression flickering through several emotions before settling on practiced warmth. He said something to the group around him, then began walking toward Nora. Margot followed, her hand possessively on his arm. "Nora," Julian said as he reached her, his voice carrying just far enough for nearby guests to hear. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot." He leaned in as if to kiss her cheek, and whispered so only she could hear, "Remember what we discussed. Smile. Be gracious. Don't embarrass me." Then he pulled back, his public smile returning. "You remember Margot, of course." Margot extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Nora," she purred. "You look lovely. Pregnancy suits you. How are you feeling?" The question was loaded with false concern. Nora recognized the trap. If she said she felt terrible, she would seem weak. If she said she felt fine, she would have no excuse for any show of emotion later. "I'm managing," Nora said carefully, not taking Margot's hand. "Thank you for asking." Margot's smile tightened at the snub, but she recovered quickly. "Well, please make yourself comfortable. There are plenty of seats, and the staff can bring you sparkling water or juice if you need anything." She gestured vaguely toward the seating areas. "We want you to enjoy yourself tonight." The condescension was thick enough to choke on. "We." Margot was already speaking as the hostess, as Julian's partner, as the woman in charge. Julian's hand found the small of Nora's back, guiding her toward a quiet corner away from the main gathering. His grip was firm, just shy of painful. When they were out of immediate earshot, his smile vanished. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "I told you to be friendly." She offered her hand, Nora replied quietly. "I'm not shaking hands with your mistress, Julian. There are limits even I won't cross." "You'll cross whatever limits I tell you to cross," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You agreed to come. You agreed to be civil. So smile, Nora. Smile and nod and stop making this harder than it needs to be." A contraction rippled through her belly, stronger than the ones that morning. Nora gasped softly, her hand pressing against her stomach. Julian's eyes narrowed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," she managed. "Just Braxton Hicks." "It's fine." "It better be fine," he said coldly. "We're not doing this tonight, Nora. We're not having drama or medical emergencies. This is my night. Do you understand?" Before she could respond, Harrison Caldwell himself approached, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive suit. He had always been kind to Nora, back when Julian still brought her to business dinners. "Nora," he said warmly, taking her hands in his. "Thank you for being here. You're very gracious." He glanced at Julian. "Might I borrow your wife for a moment? There are some people who'd love to say hello." Julian hesitated, clearly not wanting to let her out of his sight, but unable to refuse his mentor without appearing controlling. "Of course," he said with a forced smile. I'll find you later, Nora. Harrison guided Nora gently toward a quieter section of the garden. When they were away from the crowds, his expression turned serious. Nora, I want you to know that I didn't know what this party was truly about until yesterday. Julian told me it was a business celebration. When I learned the real purpose, I was deeply uncomfortable. Then why didn't you cancel it? Nora asked, surprised by his honesty. He sighed heavily. By then, invitations had been sent, arrangements made. And frankly, Julian is my business partner. Our companies are deeply intertwined. Backing out would have caused complications I couldn't afford. He paused, then added carefully, but I want you to know, I don't approve of this. What he's doing to you is unconscionable. Thank you for saying that, Nora said, tears pricking her eyes at the unexpected kindness. Most people are pretending not to notice. Most people are cowards, Harrison said bluntly. They see what's happening, but intervening would be socially awkward, so they stay silent. He squeezed her hand. Nora, if you need anything, legal support, financial assistance, a safe place to stay, you call me. I'm serious. What I'm watching unfold here tonight is wrong. Before Nora could respond, a sharp voice cut through the garden. There you are. Margot appeared, her red dress like a splash of blood against the greenery. Harrison, you're monopolizing the guest of honor. She laughed, but the sound was brittle. Julian is about to make the announcement. We need everyone gathered. The crowd quieted as Julian's voice rang out across the courtyard, amplified by a microphone. Everyone, if I could have your attention please. Nora felt nauseous. She pressed a hand to her belly, her daughter kicking frantically as if she too sensed danger. Julian stood on a raised platform near the pool, Margot joining him, their hands intertwined. They looked perfect together, like they had stepped out of a magazine ad for success and beauty. Tonight is a very special night, Julian began, his voice smooth and confident. We're here to celebrate new beginnings, bold choices, and the courage to live authentically. The words were like poison in Nora's ears. He continued, life is too short to live by outdated rules. Too short to stay in situations that no longer serve us. Too short to deny ourselves happiness because of tradition or obligation. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable, their eyes darting toward Nora. Margot and I have found something rare, Julian said, his arm wrapping around her waist. A true partnership. A meeting of equals. A love built on respect, admiration, and shared vision for the future. Nora wanted to scream. Wanted to shout the truth. But her voice was trapped in her throat, choked by humiliation and pain and the contractions that kept coming, stronger now, more insistent. Some of you may think tonight is controversial, Julian continued. Some may judge us. But I believe that being true to yourself, being honest about your feelings, is the bravest thing anyone can do. He looked directly at Nora, his eyes cold and challenging. And I hope that everyone here, including my wife, can appreciate the strength it takes to admit when something isn't working and to choose a different path. The crowd applauded, some enthusiastically, others hesitantly. But Julian wasn't finished. In fact, he said, his voice rising with theatrical energy, tonight we're going to demonstrate something truly extraordinary. Something that symbolizes new beginnings and the raw, natural beauty of life itself. He gestured toward the pool, its surface shimmering under the lights. My wife, Nora, is going to give us all the privilege of witnessing something miraculous. A water birth. Right here, right now, under the stars. The crowd gasped. Shocked murmurs erupted across the courtyard. Nora's blood ran cold. Her legs went weak. This couldn't be happening. He couldn't be serious. But Julian's smile was wide and showmanlike as he continued. Water birth is the most natural, most beautiful way to bring life into this world. And Nora has agreed to share this intimate moment with all of us, to show that even in transition, even in change, life continues. Beauty continues. Nora had agreed to no such thing. She stood frozen, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Around her, guests were staring, some with fascination, others with clear discomfort. Julian stepped down from the platform and began walking toward her, Margot at his side. The crowd parted like water, creating a path straight to where Nora stood trembling. When he reached her, his hand clamped around her wrist, his smile never faltering even as his grip tightened painfully. "Come on, darling," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Don't be shy. This is your moment to shine." "Julian, no," Nora whispered, trying to pull away. "Please. I can't do this. The baby isn't ready." "I'm not ready." "You're fine," he said through his teeth, still smiling for the cameras now pointed at them. "Stop being dramatic. The doctor said you were healthy. This is just nerves." "This isn't nerves," Nora said, her voice rising with panic. "Julian, I'm in labor. Real labor. I need to go to a hospital." "Nonsense," Margot interjected smoothly, appearing on Nora's other side. Her voice was loud, performative, designed to be heard. "Women have been giving birth naturally for thousands of years. You're strong enough to do this, Nora. Stop looking for attention." Another contraction seized her, stronger than before, stealing her breath. She gasped, doubling over. Blood rushed to her head, her vision spotting. "See?" Julian said, his voice carrying to the crowd. "Labor is starting. Perfect timing. Let's not waste this opportunity." He began dragging her toward the pool, his fingers digging into her arm. Margot walked on her other side, a hand on Nora's back, pushing her forward. "Please," Nora begged, tears streaming down her face now. "Please, Julian. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. This isn't safe." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The crowd pressed closer, forming a semicircle around the pool, everyone wanting the best view. Cameras flashed. Videos recorded. Whispered commentary provided narration. Julian guided Nora to the pool's edge. The water below looked dark and cold despite the lights illuminating it from beneath. The infinity edge created an optical illusion, making it seem like the pool dropped off into the ocean beyond. Nora's water broke with a gush of warmth down her legs. Blood mixed with amniotic fluid, staining her dress, pooling at her feet. "She's bleeding," someone in the crowd said, pointing. "Julian," she gasped. "Something's wrong. Please. Hospital. Now." But Julian's face had gone rigid with determination. He had announced this spectacle to 200 people. Backing down now would be humiliation, would be weakness, would be failure. And Julian Cross did not fail. Not publicly. "You're fine," he said again, louder, for the crowd. "Just nervous. Take a deep breath." Staff members, following Julian's orders, began forcing her toward the pool steps. Nora's feet touched the first step. The water was freezing, shocking against her skin. She cried out, trying to climb back up, but hands pushed her down. Step by step, she was forced deeper. The cold water climbed up her calves, her knees, her thighs. Another contraction ripped through her, so powerful she screamed. The water reached her waist. Her dress billowed, tangling around her legs. She could barely move. And then she felt it. Hands on her head. Margot had stepped into the pool behind her, still wearing her red dress. Her hands pressed down on Nora's head, forcing her under the surface. Nora's scream was cut off as water closed over her face. She thrashed, trying to surface, but Margot's grip was strong, determined. Under the water, Nora heard Margot's muffled voice. "Stay down. Just for a moment. Let them see you struggle. It will make the rescue more dramatic. But Nora knew there would be no rescue. This wasn't theater. This was murder dressed up as celebration. Her lungs burned. Her baby thrashed inside her, panicking from lack of oxygen. Nora clawed at Margot's arms, but her pregnant body was weak, her strength depleted. Above the water, she could see the distorted shapes of people watching. Julian's face appeared, looking down, not with concern but with calculation. Nora's vision began to darken at the edges. Her movement slowed. The cold water no longer felt cold. It felt almost welcoming, promising an end to the pain. Her eyes drifted closed. Her hands stopped fighting. This was it. The end of everything. Nora's consciousness flickered like a dying candle, her body surrendering to the inevitable. And then, like lightning splitting the darkness, strong arms crashed into the water beside her. The impact sent waves rippling across the pool's surface, disturbing the terrible stillness of the moment. Hands wrapped around her waist with irresistible force, yanking her upward with such power that Margot's grip was broken instantly. Nora broke the surface choking, gasping, water streaming from her nose and mouth. Her lungs burned as they desperately pulled in air, each breath a painful reminder that she was still alive. She was pulled against a solid chest, held with strength that felt like safety itself after the terror of drowning. "I've got you," a voice rumbled, deep and commanding. "You're safe now." Through her blurred vision, through the water still streaming from her eyes, Nora saw her rescuer. A man with dark hair plastered to his forehead, storm-gray eyes blazing with fury that seemed to burn through the night. He was tall, powerfully built, wearing what had been an expensive suit now completely soaked and clinging to his frame. Water dripped from his jaw as he held her, his arms never loosening their protective hold even as he moved them both through the water with decisive, powerful strokes. He swept her toward the pool's edge, each movement deliberate and controlled despite the obvious rage radiating from him. The crowd that had been watching with morbid fascination now stepped back, suddenly aware that they had been witnesses to something far more sinister than entertainment. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Julian sputtered from the pool's edge, his composure fracturing like thin ice. His perfect hair was disheveled, his confident mask slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. "This is a private event. You have no right to interfere." The stranger lifted Nora out of the pool with surprising gentleness given his obvious fury. His hands were careful as he set her on the deck, making sure she was stable before he pulled himself out in one fluid motion. Water streamed from his clothes, pooling around his feet as he turned to face Julian. When he spoke, his voice cut through the stunned silence of the crowd like a blade. "This," he said, each word precise and damning, "is assault. Attempted murder. And every single person here just witnessed it." His words rang across the courtyard like a bell-tolling judgment. Phones that had been recording entertainment suddenly became evidence. Guests who had been passive spectators suddenly realized they were witnesses to a crime. The shift in atmosphere was palpable, from voyeuristic excitement to uncomfortable realization. Julian's face went pale, the color draining from his skin as the implications hit him. Margot, still in the pool, began climbing out slowly, her red dress clinging to her body like blood, her earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. The water dripping from her looked like guilt made visible. The stranger crouched beside Nora, his expression softening as he looked at her trembling, bleeding form. His hand gently touched her shoulder, grounding her in the present. "Can you hear me? Stay with me. Help is coming." Nora tried to speak, tried to thank him, but another massive contraction seized her. Her body convulsed, her back arching off the deck. Blood bloomed around her, dark and terrifying against the pale stone. The crowd gasped collectively, the reality of the medical emergency finally penetrating their shock. The stranger's jaw tightened. Without hesitation, he stripped off his jacket and pressed it against her, trying to slow the bleeding. "Someone call an ambulance," he shouted, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. "Now." This woman needs immediate medical attention. She's bleeding out, someone in the crowd whispered, the word spreading like wildfire through the gathered guests. Oh God! The baby! Is she dying? Margot backed away from the pool, away from Nora, her face finally showing fear. Her carefully constructed facade had crumbled entirely. Julian stood frozen, watching his carefully orchestrated evening collapse into disaster, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish out of water. Look at me, the stranger said gently but firmly, drawing Nora's fading attention back to him. His gray eyes were intense but kind, an anchor in the chaos. My name is Theo. Theo Ashworth. And I promise you, I will not let anything happen to you or your daughter. Do you understand? Nora's lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound came. Her body was shutting down, prioritizing the life within over her own failing systems. She could feel herself slipping away, could feel her strength ebbing like a tide going out. Theo's hand found hers, his grip warm and grounding even as darkness pressed in from all sides. Stay with me, Nora. Just a little longer. Can you do that? Help is almost here. She wanted to. God, she wanted to fight, to survive, to hold her daughter and tell her she was loved and wanted and worth every moment of this nightmare. But the darkness was so heavy, so seductive in its promise of rest after years of exhaustion. Julian's voice cut through the chaos, defensive and desperate. This isn't my fault. Everyone saw. She fell. She panicked. I tried to help her. Everyone saw you push her, Theo corrected, his voice lethal with contained rage. Everyone saw you force a woman in active labor into a pool. And when the police arrive, I'll make damn sure they know exactly what happened here. Every detail. Every moment. The wail of sirens began in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Red and blue lights appeared on the coastal road, racing toward the estate like cavalry arriving at the last moment. Nora's hand tightened weakly around Theo's. Her eyes met his for just a moment, and in that gaze was everything she couldn't say. Gratitude for saving her life. Fear for her baby. A desperate plea to save her daughter even if she couldn't be saved herself. I won't let you go, Theo promised, his voice breaking slightly with emotion. Either of you. You're going to survive this. Both of you. The sirens grew deafening. The ambulance crashed through the estate gates, emergency vehicles flooding the driveway. Paramedics rushed across the lawn with equipment, their professional urgency cutting through the party's stunned paralysis. Female, late pregnancy, severe hemorrhaging, one paramedic called out, dropping to his knees beside Nora. Ma'am, can you hear me? Ma'am. Nora's eyes fluttered. She could hear voices, feel hands on her body, sense the organized chaos of medical intervention. But it all felt distant, like she was watching from underwater, still drowning despite being pulled from the pool. BP dropping. We need to move now. Prep for transport. They lifted her onto a stretcher with practiced efficiency. Theo stood, his hand still holding hers until the last possible second. I'm coming with you, he told the paramedics. Don't argue. Sir, family only, one started to protest. I am her family now, Theo said with such authority that no one dared question him further. As they wheeled Nora toward the ambulance, she caught one last glimpse of the party through her fading vision. Julian standing frozen, his perfect suit dripping, his face a mask of shock. Margot backing away, trying to blend into the crowd, trying to disappear into the shadows. Harrison Caldwell on his phone, his expression grave. And 200 guests, all recording, all witnessing, all now complicit or allied depending on what they chose to do with their footage. The ambulance doors closed, sealing Nora and Theo inside. The vehicle lurched forward, sirens screaming, racing against time and biology. Inside the ambulance, paramedics worked with frantic precision. For lines were inserted, an oxygen mask placed over Nora's face, blood pressure cuffs wrapped around her arm. The fetal monitor's erratic beeping filled the small space with urgency. Fetal heart rate dropping, one paramedic said urgently. We're losing them both. No, Theo said fiercely, still holding Nora's hand. She's a fighter. They both are. They're going to make it. Nora felt herself slipping away despite Theo's words, despite the paramedic's efforts, despite her own desperate desire to survive. Her body had been through too much, years of emotional abuse culminating in this physical trauma. She had lost too much blood. Endured too much. Her last conscious thought before darkness claimed her was of her daughter. The baby she hadn't yet held. The child she might never know. Please, she tried to whisper, though no sound emerged. Please save her. Even if you can't save me, please save my baby. Then the world went black, and Nora Bellamy surrendered to the darkness, trusting strangers to fight the battle she no longer had strength to wage. The hospital emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Nora's stretcher burst through automatic doors, paramedics shouting medical information to the trauma team waiting inside. Female, 34 years old, 37 weeks pregnant, severe hemorrhaging, possible placental abruption. BP 70/40 and dropping. Fetal heart rate erratic. Doctors and nurses swarmed, their movements precise and efficient. Hands stripped away Nora's wet, bloody dress. Monitors were attached. More 4 lines inserted. A senior obstetrician appeared, her face grave as she assessed the situation. We need to get this baby out now, she said. Prep for emergency C-section. Call the NICU team. This infant is going to need immediate intervention. Theo stood just outside the trauma bay, his soaked suit dripping onto the sterile floor, his hands shaking with adrenaline and fear. A nurse tried to guide him away, but he refused to move. I'm staying, he said. She has no one else. Sir, you need to let us work. You can wait in the family area. I'm not leaving her, Theo repeated, his voice cracking. His eyes never left Nora's pale face visible through the controlled chaos. She needs to know someone is here. That someone cares whether she lives or dies. The nurse looked at him for a long moment, saw something in his expression that made her relent. Perhaps she recognized the look of someone who had lost someone before, who couldn't bear to fail again. Stay against that wall. Don't interfere. Understood? He nodded, pressing himself against the cold tile, watching as they wheeled Nora toward the operating room. As she passed, her hand slipped off the edge of the gurney, hanging limp and lifeless. Theo caught it, squeezed once, then let go as they rushed her through double doors that swung shut between them. The waiting room was sterile and cold. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Uncomfortable plastic chairs lined the walls. A television played news no one watched. Theo sat with his head in his hands, his expensive suit ruined, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum when he shifted, his mind replaying everything he had witnessed. He had been at that party by accident, really. An invitation from Harrison Caldwell for a potential business collaboration. Theo ran a tech company, had built it from nothing into a multi-million-dollar enterprise through determination and innovation. He knew people like Julian Cross, had met dozens of ambitious men who measured their worth in deals and dollars, who saw people as resources to be exploited rather than humans to be cherished. But he had never seen cruelty quite so calculated. Quite so public. Quite so devastating. The moment he had seen Julian pushing that pregnant woman toward the pool, something inside Theo had snapped. Memories flooded back, painful and sharp as broken glass. His sister Grace. 5 years ago, Grace had been in a relationship with a man named Derek. Charming, successful, controlling. Derek had isolated her from family, convinced her she was worthless, destroyed her self-esteem piece by piece until there was nothing left but doubt and fear. By the time the family realized how bad things were, it was too late. Grace had taken her own life rather than face another day under Derek's control. Her suicide note had been heartbreaking in its simplicity, I'm so tired of being nothing. I just want the pain to stop. Theo had found her. Had held her cooling body. Had screamed until his voice gave out. The image still haunted him, his vibrant, talented sister reduced to a shell, then to nothing at all. And tonight, watching Nora being forced into that pool, watching her husband and his mistress orchestrate her humiliation, Theo had seen Grace all over again. The same helplessness. The same public degradation. The same casual cruelty from someone who was supposed to love and protect. But this time, he could intervene. This time, he could save someone. This time, he wouldn't stand by politely while a woman was destroyed. So he had dove into that pool without thinking, without caring about consequences or social awkwardness or business relationships. He had simply acted, the way he wished someone had acted for Grace. Footsteps approached, echoing in the quiet hallway. Theo looked up to find Harrison Caldwell standing there, his face drawn with guilt and shame. The older man had aged years in the past hour. "How is she?" Harrison asked quietly. "I don't know yet. They took her into surgery." Theo's voice was hoarse from emotion. "They said the baby's in distress." Harrison sank into a chair beside him, the plastic creaking under his weight. "This is my fault. I should have stopped at the moment Julian announced his plans. I should have seen what he was capable of." "Yes," Theo said bluntly. "You should have. But you were more concerned with avoiding awkwardness than protecting a vulnerable woman." Harrison flinched but didn't argue. He knew the truth when he heard it. "You're right. Completely right." He ran a hand through his silver hair, messing the usually perfect style. "I've already given a statement to the police. Told them everything I witnessed. And I have copies of security footage from the estate. Every angle. Every moment." "Good," Theo said. "Because Julian is going to try to spin this. He already started tonight, claiming she fell, claiming she was hysterical." "Not anymore," a new voice said. Both men turned to see a police detective approaching, badge displayed. "I'm Detective Sarah Chen. I was called to the scene at the Caldwell estate." She sat down across from them, pulling out a notepad. "We have multiple witnesses confirming that Mr. Cross forcibly pushed his wife into the pool while she was in active labor. We also have footage of Ms. Sinclair holding Mrs. Cross underwater. Both have been detained for questioning." "Are they under arrest?" Theo asked. "Not yet, but that's coming. We're building a case for assault, reckless endangerment, and potentially attempted murder depending on the medical outcomes." Detective Chen studied Theo carefully. "Mr. Ashworth, I need your statement. Everything you saw and heard." For the next 30 minutes, Theo recounted the evening in excruciating detail. Julian's theatrical announcement. The crowd's complicity in their silence. Nora's desperate pleas for help that went ignored. The blood in the water mixing with chlorine. Margot's hands pushing her under, holding her down while she drowned. Harrison corroborated everything, adding details about the conversations leading up to the event, about Julian's controlling behavior toward Nora that he'd witnessed over the years, about warning signs that had been ignored because confronting them would have been uncomfortable. When they finished, Detective Chen closed her notepad. "Thank you both. This is going to be a high-profile case. Mr. Cross is well-connected, wealthy, and he'll hire the best attorneys money can buy. Then we hire better ones," Theo said simply. "Whatever it takes. That woman in there deserves justice." The detective studied him curiously. "You just met her tonight, and yet you're willing to go to war for her. Why?" Theo's throat tightened. The memory of Grace rose again, unbidden but undeniable. "Because someone should have gone to war for my sister, and no one did. Because I watched her die slowly under someone's control, and I won't watch it happen to another woman. Not when I have the power to stop it." Before Detective Chen could respond, the surgical doors opened. The obstetrician emerged, still in her scrubs, her mask pulled down. She looked exhausted, and there were blood stains on her surgical gown that told their own story. Theo stood immediately, his heart hammering. "How is she? How are they?" The doctor's expression was carefully neutral, the practiced face of someone who delivered difficult news regularly. "Mrs. Cross lost a significant amount of blood. We had to perform an emergency C-section and a partial hysterectomy to stop the hemorrhaging. She's stable now, but critical. The next 24 hours will be crucial." "And the baby?" Harrison asked. The doctor's face softened slightly. "A girl. 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Premature and struggling, but alive. She's in the NICU on respiratory support. The next few days will tell us more about her prognosis." "Can I see them?" Theo asked. "Can I see Nora? Are you family?" "I'm the closest thing she has right now," Theo said firmly. "Her husband tried to kill her tonight. She needs to know someone is on her side." The doctor considered this, glancing between Theo's desperate expression and Detective Chen's badge. She nodded slowly. "Recovery room. 10 minutes. That's all I can give you right now." "Thank you," Theo said, relief flooding through him. "Thank you for saving them." "Thank you for your quick action," the doctor replied. "Another 5 minutes and we would have lost them both." The recovery room was dim and quiet, the only sounds were the steady beep of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen. Nora lay in the bed, her skin nearly as white as the sheets, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that breathed for her, monitored her, kept her tethered to life by the thinnest of threads. Theo approached slowly, careful not to disturb any of the equipment. Up close, she looked even more fragile. Dark circles under her eyes like bruises. Hollow cheeks that spoke of long-term stress. Her lips were chapped and pale. This was the visible toll of months, maybe years, of suffering. But she was breathing. Her heart was beating. She was here. He pulled a chair close and sat, taking her hand gently in his. Her fingers were cold, limp, but he held them anyway, trying to warm them with his own heat. "My name is Theo," he said softly, even though she couldn't hear him. He needed to speak, needed to fill the silence with something other than the mechanical sounds of life support. "Theo Ashworth. We met tonight under the worst possible circumstances, but I want you to know something. You're not alone anymore." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I don't know what your life was like before tonight, but I saw enough to know it was unbearable. I saw a man who should have protected you instead try to destroy you. I saw people who should have helped you instead watch like it was entertainment." His voice grew stronger. "But I also saw your strength. The way you kept fighting even when you had every reason to give up. The way you protected your daughter even as you were drowning. That kind of strength doesn't come from weakness, Nora. It comes from something unbreakable deep inside you." The monitors beeped steadily. Nora's chest rose and fell with mechanical precision. "Your daughter is alive," Theo continued. "She's tiny and struggling, but she's a fighter like her mother. The nurses say she has a strong spirit. That she's not giving up." He squeezed her hand gently. "So you can't give up either. You have to come back. You have to wake up and hold her and tell her that everything you went through was worth it because she's here." A nurse entered quietly to check vitals. She smiled sadly at Theo. "You should go home, get some rest. She'll be sedated for a while." "I'll stay," Theo said. "Just a little longer." The nurse nodded and left them alone again. Theo sat in that dim recovery room for hours, holding the hand of a woman he had just met, making silent promises he intended to keep. That Julian would face justice. That Nora would have support. That her daughter would grow up knowing her mother's strength, not her father's cruelty. Days passed in a blur of police statements, media coverage, and hospital vigils. The story exploded across news outlets and social media with unprecedented velocity. Billionaire forces pregnant wife into pool at party celebrating his mistress. Videos from the event went viral, watched millions of times, dissected frame by both professional journalists and amateur detectives online. Public opinion turned swift and merciless against Julian Cross. His business partners issued carefully worded statements distancing themselves from him. Major clients canceled contracts overnight. Advertisers pulled sponsorships. The carefully built empire he had sacrificed his marriage to achieve began crumbling in real time, each fallen brick documented gleefully by the media. Margot Sinclair fared no better. Her influencer career evaporated overnight like morning dew under a harsh sun. Brands dropped her within hours. Her social media accounts were flooded with such intense condemnation that she deleted everything and fled, reportedly to Europe, where she hoped to escape the scandal. But the internet never forgot. And neither did the justice system. Julian was arrested on the fourth day, charged with assault, reckless endangerment, and domestic violence. Bail was set at $2 million, which he posted immediately, but the damage to his reputation was irreversible. His mugshot became a meme, his name synonymous with cruelty. Margot was charged in absentia with assault and attempted murder. An international warrant was issued for her arrest. Throughout it all, Theo kept his promise. He came to the hospital every day, sitting with Nora even though she remained unconscious, even though doctors couldn't say when or if she would wake. He read to her from books he thought she might like. He told her about the weather outside. He updated her on her daughter's progress. He also visited the NICU, standing at the window watching Nora's daughter fight for every breath. The nurses had started calling her baby girl Cross, but Theo hated that name. This child deserved better than to be forever linked to the man who had nearly killed her mother. On the fifth day, Harrison Caldwell joined Theo at the NICU window. The older man looked haggard, aged by guilt. "I've been making arrangements," Harrison said quietly. "A trust fund for the baby. Enough to cover medical expenses, education, everything she'll need. It's the least I can do." "That's generous," Theo said. "But what she needs most is her mother. Have you spoken to the doctors about Nora's prognosis?" "They're cautiously optimistic. No brain damage from oxygen deprivation. Her body is healing. But she experienced severe trauma, physical and psychological. When she wakes, she'll need extensive support." "She'll have it," Theo said firmly. "I'm making arrangements too. A legal team to handle the divorce and custody. A therapist who specializes in abuse recovery. A safe place for her to live, away from Julian and his influence." Harrison glanced at him. "You're investing a lot in a stranger." "She's not a stranger anymore," Theo replied. "And even if she was, it would still be the right thing to do. Too many people stood by and did nothing. I won't be one of them." Inside the NICU, baby girl Cross stirred, her tiny fist waving. The monitors showed her stats improving slightly. Small gains, but gains nonetheless. On the sixth day, Nora woke. It happened quietly, without drama. One moment she was unconscious, the next her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, confusion and fear written across her face. The nurse noticed immediately and rushed to her side. "Mrs. Cross, can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You're safe. Don't try to move yet." Nora's lips moved, forming words that came out as barely a whisper. "My baby. Where is my baby?" The nurse's expression softened. "She's in the NICU. She's alive, Mrs. Cross. Your daughter is alive." Tears spilled from Nora's eyes, running down her temples into her hair. "Alive," she repeated, her voice breaking. "She's alive. You have been through major surgery. You lost a lot of blood. You need to rest and let your body heal." "Julian," Nora said suddenly, fear sharpening her voice. "Is he here?" Is he coming? No, the nurse said firmly. He's not allowed near you. There's a protective order in place. You're safe, Mrs. Cross. I promise you're safe. When Theo entered the hospital room 15 minutes later, relief flooded his expression. You're awake, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank God you're awake. Nora studied him, this stranger who had become her savior. He was handsome in an understated way, tall and broad-shouldered with kind eyes and an air of quiet strength. You saved me, she said softly. The nurse told me. You pulled me out. Theo pulled a chair close to her bed. I did what anyone should have done. What everyone should have done. But they didn't, Nora said, fresh tears spilling. They just watched. They filmed it like entertainment. I know, Theo said gently. And I'm sorry. Sorry that happened to you. Sorry that your husband betrayed you so completely. Sorry that people failed you. Over the following weeks, Nora's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. The physical wounds healed faster than the emotional ones. Her body knitted itself back together with remarkable resilience, but her psyche remained fractured, sharp edges of trauma cutting into every quiet moment. She had nightmares that woke her screaming. Water closing over her head. Margot's hands pushing her down. Julian's cold eyes watching her drown. The nurses would rush in, speaking softly, grounding her in the present, reminding her she was safe. Theo arranged for a therapist, Dr. Patricia Wells, who specialized in trauma and domestic abuse. Dr. Wells came to the hospital, conducting sessions at Nora's bedside. What you experienced wasn't just physical assault, Dr. Wells explained during their first session. It was psychological torture. Years of emotional abuse culminating in a public attempt on your life. Your mind and body will need time to process that. Healing isn't linear, Nora. There will be setbacks. That doesn't mean you're failing. How do I stop being afraid? Nora asked. How do I stop seeing his face everywhere? Hearing his voice? You don't stop, not right away. But you learn to recognize those thoughts as echoes of trauma, not truth. You learn that you survived, which means you're stronger than he ever gave you credit for. Through it all, Theo remained constant. He visited daily, bringing books and magazines, sitting quietly when Nora didn't want to talk, listening when she did. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Never demanded gratitude or affection in return for his help. He was simply present. Steadfast. Proving through consistent action that not all men wielded kindness as a weapon. Isla, the name Nora had chosen for her daughter, meaning island, a place of refuge and strength, continued to improve as well. After 3 weeks, she was breathing on her own. After 4, she started bottle feeding. After 5, doctors began discussing discharge plans. The legal proceedings moved forward with surprising speed, fueled by overwhelming evidence and public outrage. Julian's attorneys tried every tactic. They claimed misunderstanding, stress, accidental escalation. They painted Nora as mentally unstable, suggested she had jumped into the pool herself for attention. But the videos didn't lie. Frame by frame, they showed Julian's hands on Nora's back, pushing. They showed Margot in the water, holding Nora under. They showed a crowd of witnesses doing nothing. Julian's business collapsed entirely. Partners sued for damages. Clients demanded refunds. The company he had built, the empire he had sacrificed everything for, dissolved into bankruptcy and scandal. Everything Julian had worked for, everything he had valued more than his wife and child, was gone. And he had no one to blame but himself. 6 weeks after the incident, Nora was discharged from the hospital. Theo had arranged for a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the gated community she had shared with Julian. It was modest but comfortable, with a nursery already set up and security measures in place. The apartment was perfect, soft colors, comfortable furniture, large windows that let in natural light. The nursery made Nora cry. Pale yellow walls, a white crib, a rocking chair positioned near the window, shelves already stocked with books and toys. Theo had thought of everything. I don't know how to thank you, Nora said as he set Isla's car seat down gently. You've given me everything. Safety, support, a home. I'll never be able to repay this. You don't need to repay it, Theo said. Just heal, Nora. Rebuild. Show Isla that women don't have to accept cruelty. That there's life after escape. That's enough. Over the following months, Nora slowly reclaimed pieces of herself she thought had been lost forever. She started painting again, setting up an easel in the corner of the living room. The canvases that emerged were raw and honest, swirls of blue and crimson, figures drowning in surfacing, studies in survival and strength. Dr. Wells encouraged the art as therapy. You're processing trauma, translating pain into something visible. That's powerful, Nora. Don't stop. A small gallery in the arts district heard about her story, saw her work, and offered an exhibition. Nora was terrified at first. The idea of public exposure after everything felt overwhelming. But Theo encouraged her gently. Your story is already public. People saw the videos. They know what happened. But now you get to control the narrative. You get to show them who you really are. Not a victim, but a survivor. An artist. A mother. A woman with depth and talent and worth. The exhibition opened on a cool autumn evening. The gallery was packed, some people coming from morbid curiosity about the woman from the pool incident, but many genuinely moved by the emotional honesty of her work. Nora stood near the entrance, Isla asleep in a carrier against her chest. She wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back, her face free of heavy makeup. She looked nothing like the polished wife who had attended Julian's parties. She looked real. Authentic. Whole. Your work is extraordinary, a woman said, stopping in front of a large canvas titled Surfacing. It shows such strength. Such resilience. Thank you, Nora replied, her hand resting on Isla's small back. It wasn't easy to create. But nothing worth doing ever is. The legal proceedings finally concluded. Julian was sentenced to 6 years in prison for assault and reckless endangerment. Margot was extradited from France and faced similar charges, receiving 4 years. Both would carry the conviction for the rest of their lives, their reputations permanently destroyed. Nora didn't attend the sentencing hearing. She chose not to give Julian her presence, not to let him see her face or hear her voice. Instead, she submitted a victim impact statement read by the prosecutor. Julian Cross spent years convincing me I was worthless. That I should be grateful for his attention, thankful for his control. He isolated me, demeaned me, and finally tried to kill me in front of 200 witnesses. But I survived. My daughter survived. And we are building a life he cannot touch. That is my victory. Not his imprisonment, but my freedom. When Theo told Nora about the sentencing, she felt less satisfaction than she expected. Justice had been served, but it didn't erase what happened. It didn't give back the years she lost or repair the damage to her psyche. How do you feel? Theo asked. Empty, Nora admitted. I thought I'd feel triumphant or relieved. But mostly I just feel tired. Tired of thinking about him. Tired of letting him take up space in my head. That's understandable. Healing isn't about feeling perfect. It's about feeling less broken every day. Over the following year, Nora continued therapy, continued painting, continued raising Isla. She published a memoir, not sensationalized or vengeful, but honest and vulnerable, offering hope to others trapped in darkness. The book became a bestseller, not because people wanted scandal, but because Nora's voice was authentic. She didn't pretend healing was linear or easy. She talked about setbacks, about days when getting out of bed felt impossible, about the work required to untangle abuse from identity. Survivors wrote to her by the hundreds, sharing their own stories, thanking her for making them feel less alone. One letter in particular moved Nora to tears. It was from a woman named Rebecca whose sister had taken her own life after years of abuse. Your story gave me what I couldn't give my sister, hope. Proof that escape is possible. That life after abuse can be beautiful. I can't save her, but maybe I can save someone else by sharing your book, by refusing to stay silent when I see warning signs. Nora framed that letter and hung it in her studio. On hard days, when trauma echoed louder than progress, she read it and remembered that her survival meant something beyond herself. Theo remained constant throughout. Their relationship evolved slowly, organically, built on friendship and respect rather than rescue dynamics. He never pushed for more than Nora was ready to give. Never made her feel obligated. But gradually, carefully, Nora found herself wanting more. Wanting to explore what could exist between them when she was no longer drowning, when she was standing on solid ground. One evening, after Isla was asleep, Nora and Theo sat on her small balcony overlooking the city. 2 years had passed since the night that changed everything. 2 years of therapy, growth, rebuilding. I've been thinking, Nora said, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. About us. About what this is. Theo looked at her, patient, giving her space to articulate what she needed. You've been my friend, my support, my anchor. But Theo, you've also been more than that for a long time now. And I think I'm finally ready to acknowledge it. To explore it. She met his eyes. If you're still interested. If you haven't been just waiting out of obligation. Theo set down his own mug, turning to face her fully. Nora, I stopped being here out of obligation after about 2 weeks. I've stayed because I care about you. Because watching you rebuild yourself has been the most inspiring thing I've ever witnessed. Because Isla's laughter is the best sound in the world. Because when I imagine my future, you're both in it. He reached for her hand. But only if that's what you want. Only if you're choosing me because you want to, not because you feel you owe me or because you're afraid to be alone. I need to know you're choosing me freely. I'm choosing you freely, Nora said, her voice steady and sure. Not because you saved me, but because you see me. The real me. Not a project or a victim or someone to fix. Just me. Flawed and healing and doing my best. And you've shown me what real partnership looks like. Respect, patience, presence without control. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, full of promise. Not passionate desperation, but careful hope. The beginning of something built on truth rather than illusion, on equality rather than control. 6 months later, Theo asked Nora to marry him. Not with a grand gesture or public spectacle, but privately, in her studio while Isla napped, surrounded by Nora's paintings of survival and strength. I don't need marriage to know I want to spend my life with you, he said. But I want to make the commitment publicly. I want Isla to grow up seeing what a real partnership looks like. And I want you to know that this time, marriage will be different. Equal, respectful, built on truth. Nora looked at the ring he offered, simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious diamond Julian had given her. Yes, she said. But with conditions. We write our own vows. We get married somewhere small and private. And we go to couples counseling to make sure we're building something healthy. I won't repeat my mistakes. I would expect nothing less, Theo said, sliding the ring onto her finger. Those are all reasonable conditions. In fact, I insist on them too. They married 4 months later in a small ceremony on a beach, the same beach where they had taken Isla for her first ocean visit. Only close friends attended. Harrison Caldwell gave Nora away, a symbolic gesture of apology and support. Dr. Wells officiated, having become not just Nora's therapist but a trusted friend. The vows they spoke were honest and specific. Promises about communication, respect, equality. Acknowledgement that marriage required work, that healing was ongoing, that they would stumble and need to course correct. I promise to see you as you are, Theo said, not as I want you to be. I promise to earn your trust every day. I promise that my love will never feel like a cage. I promise to keep growing, Nora said, her voice strong. I promise to speak my truth even when it's uncomfortable. I promise that I will never make myself smaller to make you comfortable. And I promise to build a life where our daughter sees what real love looks like. When they kissed, sealing their vows, Isla clapped from where she sat with the small gathering. 2 years old and already understanding that this moment was important, that her mother was happy, that their family was growing. Years passed. Isla grew from a fragile preemie into a thriving child with chubby cheeks and a determined personality. She rolled over early, sat up early, seemed determined to meet every milestone ahead of schedule as if making up for her difficult start. Nora's art career blossomed. More galleries requested her work. A prominent art magazine ran a feature article about her journey from abuse survivor to celebrated artist. The exposure brought both opportunities and challenges. Some people only saw her as the woman from the viral video. But others recognized her genuine talent, her emotional honesty, her unique perspective. By Isla's 7th birthday, their life had settled into comfortable rhythms. Nora's art career was thriving. Theo's tech company continued to grow, but he had learned to balance work with family, refusing to repeat the mistakes he had seen in men like Julian who sacrificed relationships for success. They bought a house together, larger than the apartment but still modest, with a big backyard where Isla could play and a separate studio for Nora's work. It was filled with light and laughter and the comfortable chaos of family life. One evening, as Nora tucked Isla into bed, her daughter asked a question that had clearly been building. "Mama, do you ever wish things had been different? That I had a different story about how I was born?" Nora sat on the edge of the bed, brushing hair from Isla's forehead. "Sometimes," she admitted honestly. "I wish you hadn't had to fight so hard just to take your first breath. I wish your beginning had been easier, safer, filled with only joy." "But," Isla prompted, sensing there was more. "But I wouldn't change who you are. And all of that, as hard as it was, made you who you are. Strong, brave, compassionate. You understand that life is precious because yours was almost taken away. You understand that some people fight battles no one can see." Isla thought about this seriously. "Like you, Mama. You fight battles people can't see." "Every day," Nora confirmed. "But that's okay. Fighting doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it just looks like getting up, showing up, and choosing to keep going." "I'm proud of you, Mama," Isla said with the simple sincerity only children possess. "You're the bravest person I know. And you're the bravest person I know, sweetheart. We're both fighters. We both survived things that should have destroyed us. That makes us family in the deepest way possible." Years later, when Isla was 12, she asked to read her mother's memoir. Nora hesitated, worried that the details would be too much, too traumatic for a young girl to process. But Isla insisted. "I'm old enough to understand, Mama. And I want to know the whole truth. Not the kid version. The real version." So Nora gave her the book and waited nervously while Isla read. It took her 3 days, reading late into the night, processing the story of her own beginning from her mother's perspective. When she finished, Isla found Nora in her studio. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped her arms around her mother and held on tight. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," she finally whispered. "You didn't deserve any of it." "No one deserves it," Nora replied, holding her daughter close. "But it happened. And we survived. That's what matters." Isla pulled back, her eyes serious beyond her years. "I want to help other people like you. People who are trapped and scared and think they have no way out. When I grow up, I want to do something that matters." "You already do something that matters," Nora said. You exist. You're proof that even the darkest situations can produce light. But yes, if you want to help others, I'll support that in any way I can. 2 years later, at 14, Isla started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping with childcare, tutoring kids, being a listening ear for children whose mothers were fleeing abuse. She saw herself in those kids, understood their fear and confusion, and offered the kind of compassionate presence that came from lived experience. On what would have been Nora and Julian's 20th wedding anniversary, a day that could have been marked with bitterness, Nora instead chose celebration. She, Theo, and Isla went to the beach, the same beach where she and Theo had married, where they had taught Isla to swim, where so many good memories had been built. They walked along the shore, Isla running ahead to collect shells, Theo's hand warm in Nora's. "Do you ever regret it?" Theo asked. "The years you lost with him?" "No," Nora said honestly. "Because those years taught me what I didn't want. They taught me to recognize red flags, to value myself, to understand that love should never hurt. Without that experience, as awful as it was, I wouldn't have recognized what we have as precious." She stopped walking, turning to face the ocean. The water stretched endlessly before them, the same water that had once tried to claim her life, now just beautiful, just natural, just part of the world she inhabited without fear. "I used to be afraid of water," she said. "Afraid it would pull me under again. But I realized something. Water didn't hurt me. Julian did. And I don't have to fear the ocean just because a terrible man used it as a weapon." Theo squeezed her hand. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." "I'm not strong," Nora corrected. "I'm just stubborn. I refuse to let him win. I refuse to let trauma define me forever. That's not strength. That's just survival." "That's exactly what strength is," Theo said. "Survival against overwhelming odds. Choosing to keep going when giving up would be easier. You survived, Nora. And you built something beautiful from the wreckage. That's extraordinary." Isla ran back to them, her hands full of shells, her face bright with joy. "Look what I found, Mama. This one's for you. It's shaped like a heart." Nora took the shell, small and white and surprisingly heart-shaped. "Thank you, sweetheart. It's perfect." Isla grinned, then took off running again, chasing waves, fearless and free. Nora watched her daughter, this miracle child who had fought so hard to be born, who was now thriving, growing, becoming her own person. Everything Nora had endured, every moment of pain and fear and struggle, had been worth it to bring Isla into the world. That was the story she chose to tell herself. Not that she had been broken by a cruel man, but that she had survived, rebuilt, and created something beautiful. That she had transformed suffering into art, trauma into advocacy, near death into vibrant life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in those familiar shades of amber and rose, Nora made a promise to herself. She would keep telling her story, not because she was defined by it, but because visibility mattered. Because other women needed to see that survival was possible. That healing was possible. That building a life worth living after trauma was possible. She had been pushed into darkness and had fought her way back to light. She had drowned and learned to swim. She had been told she was worthless and had proven her infinite worth. That was her victory. Not Julian's imprisonment or public humiliation. But her own transformation. Her own reclaimed joy. Her own rebuilt life. The water lapped at her feet, cool and gentle, no longer frightening. Theo stood beside her, steady and present. Isla played nearby, laughing and alive and free. This was more than survival. This was triumph. And as darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead, Nora Bellamy stood on that beach and felt, for the first time in her entire life, completely and entirely free. The woman who had once believed she was nothing had discovered she was everything. The mother who had almost lost her daughter now watched that daughter thrive. The artist who had been silenced now spoke her truth in bold colors and honest words. Julian had tried to drown her. But water, she had learned, could not destroy her. Nothing could. Because she had found something stronger than fear, stronger than trauma, stronger than cruelty. She had found herself. And that self was unbreakable. If Nora's story moved you, if you see yourself or someone you love in her journey, I want you to know something vital: you are not alone. Abuse thrives in silence and darkness, but it cannot survive when exposed to light. If you are trapped, scared, feeling worthless, please hear this truth: you are valuable. You deserve safety. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. And escape is possible, even when it seems impossible. This story, while containing dramatic elements, reflects the reality that many face behind closed doors. The isolation, the gaslighting, the slow erosion of self-worth, these are tools used by abusers everywhere. But Nora's journey also reflects another truth: that survival is possible, that healing can happen, that life after abuse can be not just bearable but beautiful. Remember, strength isn't the absence of fear or pain. Strength is continuing to fight even when you're terrified, even when you're exhausted, even when giving up would be easier. Every day you survive is a victory. Every small step toward freedom matters. If you're supporting someone in an abusive situation, don't underestimate the power of simply being present. Sometimes the difference between life and death is one person saying, "I see you. I believe you. You matter." Be that person. Don't look away because it's uncomfortable. Don't stay silent because it's awkward. Lives are literally at stake. And for those who have survived, who have escaped, who are rebuilding, you are not broken. You are not damaged goods. You are warriors who have been through battle and emerged scarred but breathing. Your scars are not shameful, they are proof of your strength. Your story matters. Your voice matters. Your future matters. Nora's story reminds us that sometimes the most profound act of resistance is simply refusing to disappear. Refusing to accept someone else's definition of your worth. Refusing to let trauma have the final word in your story. So share this story with someone who needs hope today. Let them know that drowning doesn't have to be permanent. That with help, with support, with determination, they too can surface. They too can breathe again. They too can build a life worth living. Because every person deserves what Nora finally found, not just survival, but genuine freedom. Not just existence, but joy. Not just breathing, but truly living. The water no longer drowns. The darkness no longer consumes. The past no longer defines. That is the ultimate victory. That is the message. That is the hope we must never stop sharing. You are stronger than you know. You are worthy of love that doesn't hurt. And no matter how deep the water or how dark the night, morning always comes for those who keep fighting. Keep fighting. Keep surfacing. Keep believing that your story isn't over yet.